Hey guys, welcome to Reds Projects. This episode's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to show you a bunch of photos, like a slideshow of a truck engine I rebuilt about a year ago. I used to be a diesel mechanic, and this was one of the many truck engines that I rebuilt, and I just happened to document it a lot, take a lot of photos of it, so I thought I would make it into a video and talk you guys through it and show you everything about them. So the truck in question is a MAN. It's like ex-Australia Post truck. I'll probably put a photo up, I'll describe it a bit better. The motor is a 6.7 litre or 420 cubic inch inline 6-cylinder, twin turbo. The engine, the code name was a D0836, I think. It made about 280 horsepower, and it had a 12-speed automated manual gearbox behind it. So the truck came in, it was blowing a lot of smoke, leaking a lot of oil from the filler cap at the front of the truck and blowing the dipstick out. So we came to the conclusion that it had a lot of blow-by, so it probably had a broken piston or something along those lines. And sure enough, it broke a couple piston rings. We're not really sure why. It did have a lot of Ks on it, but yep, 2 piston rings were broken on one cylinder, and because of that, it had lots of blow-by. It was putting a lot of oil into the inlet. You can see all the oil that came out of the intercooler there, and as well as that, it put some grooves in the bore that were just no good. So long story short, we ended up getting a new block for it. I'll talk more about that later, but it was just going to work out cheaper to get a new block rather than try and repair the old one. So there's the brand new bore, nice crosshatch in it, and came with main caps and bolts and everything already. It was quite a heavy thing as well. We had to use the forklift to move it around. So first thing, besides cleaning it and getting oil and stuff off it, put the oil squirters in and the lifters. You can see the lifters at the top there, and they were pretty big things. They're solid. These things have a valve lash, so they're solid lifters. Slid the cam in, put the main bearings in. Main bearings as well, they were huge. They were the ones that go on the main caps, but yeah, they were huge things. And as well as huge, the crank was one big heavy thing. Doesn't look too big there, but it's nearly the width of a smart car, so it is quite big, really. Dropped it into the block. Had to use the engine crane to lift it to drop it into the block. Put the caps on, torque them down. There was some stupidly high torque setting on those bolts. Had to lean the block over to put the pistons in. I did most of this on a pallet, just kind of moving it around before I would put it on, because we didn't have an engine stand that would take the weight. There's pistons and rods. We reused the rods, new rod bolts, and new pistons, new rings, new gudgeon pin, new circlips. There they are. They're quite big and heavy duty. There they are again, ready to go in. And that's the block with all the pistons in. Block was starting to get quite heavy at this point, so I had to make up some lifting brackets type thing to maneuver it around. Next thing was bell housing, flywheel, clutch, put all that stuff on the back, and timing cover onto the inner timing cover onto the front, along with all the timing gears. So you got compressor, the cam, oil pump, and fuel pump, and then the outer timing cover, as well as the drive, the belt drive at the front. It runs off the front of the compressor, which that drive turns the water pump and the alternator, I think, from memory. Fuel pump at the top there, and the oil pump and oil filter housing, and that's just another shot of the compressor and the front drive there. And they're ready to put the pre-sump on at the bottom of the screen. It pretty much just like a big crank girdle, main cap girdle type thing, and then just checking over a few things before dropping it into the truck. And doing that was a job for the forklift. The thing was quite heavy at that point and hard to maneuver, so dropped it in with the forklift, line the clutch up, put it into the gearbox, drop it down onto the mounts, and sitting happy there. Then had to fix the sump. The sump was like a 2-skin type thing, and the inner skin was cracked, so I just welded it back up, gave it a fresh coat of paint to make it look half good, and then just a matter of getting it ready to drop the head on. Torque setting on the head was something mental. You can see the size of the breaker bar I've got there, and there was a lot of head bolts as well, so I went home with sore arms and shoulders after that. I can't remember the specs off the top of my head, but it was just mental. It was just amazingly tight. Then the time for the exhaust manifold. That was a 3-piece thing that bolted on there. And then turbos. There's the little guy at the top, big one at the bottom. So little one, or the high pressure turbo. It's on your screen now. It was roughly about 50mm size turbo. And then the bigger atmospheric turbo. That one had about a 61 or 60mm inducer. That was the size of that guy. There it is bolted on. You can see the small one at the top on the manifold, bigger one hanging off the small one. And then we go to the left side, inlet manifolds on, fuel rail, fuel lines, computer, then EGR cooler up the top there. And then the oil filter, fuel filter and plumbing. And then all the wiring and a bunch of other stuff went on as well. This thing had so many sensors and wires, and being a common rail, so much electrics on this thing. Back to the turbo side, intercooler pipes on, alternators on. The pre-cooler is on. I'll talk about that in a second. And then the rest of the plumbing is on and pretty much ready to start. That pre-cooler I just briefly mentioned, that goes from the atmospheric turbo, the big one, to the small one, and that's just pretty much a water to air intercooler type thing. So the way these work, from the air filter, it goes to the big turbo, the atmospheric turbo, then goes through the pre-cooler. They got different names, but yeah, it's a water to air intercooler. Goes through that, goes into the smaller high pressure turbo, and then goes to the front of the truck. There's a big massive air to air intercooler, and then it goes on the other side in the inlet manifold into the engine. And then the exhaust side of it goes from the motor to the small turbo, then from the small turbo to the big turbo, and then big turbo into the cat and out the truck. It was all back together, fluids in it, all ready to run. So there's a short little clip of it running. Engine ran good, nice and quiet, nothing really leaked. Just checked over everything, top fluids up. I heat cycled it probably 3 or 4 times, made sure nothing was wrong, and then it's time to take it for a drive. So here's a quick little clip of me driving it. Okay, so that was pretty much a 0 to 100 acceleration of it. That was on the freeway on ramp going uphill, and yeah, from standing start, full throttle, and you see it took off in fourth, and it would kind of skip gears and then go one after the other. These trucks are really easy to drive. They've got a automated manual gearbox in them, which is basically a manual gearbox with a clutch, but it's all controlled by the computer. You don't have a clutch pedal, you don't have a gear stick, you just have a dial on the dash. Put it in drive, accelerate, and it does everything for you. It drove great. I did a couple test drives in it until I was happy. Gave it back to the customer. It did a couple thousand Ks, I think, came back, like first service, drained the oil, checked over everything was beautiful, and gave it back, and that was it. Okay, well, if you made it this far, thanks for sticking in there. This was a bit of a boring video, but I had all these photos on my phone, and I thought I'd put them together as a video and share them, because I was quite proud of this engine. It was a good job as far as trucks go. So plenty more on the way. I've got a whole heap of parts to put on the Falcon, a whole heap of parts to put on the Ute, and a bunch of other things I can't tell you about yet, but trust me, it's going to be good. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.